Hello, everybody. My name is Berkay. I'm a third year medical student at the University of Sheffield. I'm currently undertaking my student selected module at the Delta Health Center, and I'm currently supervised by uh, Mr. Semi Abdul. Today, we're going to be talking about how to build a medical CV and how to do that, especially for surgical specialty applications for foundation year doctors. So, why does your CV actually matter? So, in terms of your specialty selection application, you're gonna have about 10 minutes to uh, per person for your selectors to review your case, which would mean that they will review your CV, your portfolio, and the extra uh, evidences that you've submitted in terms of your suitable functions for your specialty applications. Um, there is four domains when it comes to the applications process. You're firstly scored at your interview, which is the surgical bit, and it includes the most amount of points. Um, your experience, your audit, your publications, and your presentations, which would include teachings as well. So each domains are scored between A to E, A being the maximum, E being the lowest, and assessors will ask you two domain of your choice, and that will be in your interview in terms of your questions. Overclaiming is an issue when it comes to building your CV or your specialty application, and it could be a problem when it comes to your GMC registration as well. So let's have a look at the CV structure itself. To begin with, we're going to have uh, the personal details, the GNC registration number, education, postgraduate qualifications, clinical experience, research and publications, and the rest of the subjects will be covered by my colleague Zaynab. So let's start with the personal details. So you're going to include your full name as well as your GMC registration number. You're going to include your professional email address, mobile phone number, city and postcode, but not specific like sort of full home address. Uh, I'm going to include your LinkedIn or academic profile if that is something that you have. You're going to try to avoid few things when it comes to your personal details to avoid discrimination by the selectors. So date of birth or age, your photograph, your full home address, your marital status or your nationality, and you're going to try to have a your actual address instead of your student accommodation address. Secondly, your GMC registration number. After you qualify and you register with GMC, you will have that around your foundation year one time, and you should declare any sort of conditions and undertakings when you're putting your GMC number on top of your CV. So to continue, we have our education bit as well. So when it comes to your education sector, when building your medical CV, you're going to start by firstly doing a reverse chronological order, meaning that the most recent degree will be at the top and the least recent will be at the bottom. So selectors want to see where you are now, not where you were. Um, and you're going to proportionally start to uh, see how much you have done in those sections, such as, let's say, your medical degree is one of the most recent things that you have done, and it will get the most amount of place, including the most amount of descriptors. Um, Thirdly, you will try to include a dissertation context. So if you have done a dissertation or any sort of research project, try to include what they have done as well, as this is a part of your education. And lastly, your class and institution should be clearly stated when you're putting your education section out there. The format, as you can see, is the date on the left and the degree title is on the left side. To continue, we're going to talk about the postgraduate qualifications and certifications. Essential courses that you have done for your postgraduate qualifications, such as like basic surgical skills, they are really good and they make you stand out in your CV, showing that you are committed. If you have done any sort of teaching roles, such as associate fellowship or sort of like trainings, that would be great on your CV as well, but you would need to produce evidence for them. and also any sort of clinical skill certificates, such as like phlebotomy or any sort of ultrasound guided sort of like cannulas, that would look great on your certificate as well. These are again in the reverse chronological order, with the things you have done the most recently being on the top, and then them with more priority, having more space to work with. So you should describe them a bit more in detail. So in terms of your clinical experience, how is that scored? So clinical experience when it comes to surgical specialty applications is what you have attended and helped and assisted in terms of your surgeries and how many times you have done that. These are usually uh, in kept in an e-log book, which are verified at the end of your surgeries by your consultant, and they need to be signed off by a GMC registered consultant. And to get the maximum amount of points, you should do 40 plus cases, which will give you the most amount of points in your specialty application. Again, you can include sort of like the highlights of the surgeries that you have done and assisted in this section, and this will look really good on your CV as well. Um, you shouldn't include the surgeries that you didn't assist in your e-logbook. You can only include them if you have assisted in the actual patient surgery. And lastly, we have our research and publications. So, in terms of what you will put in your CV is again in the reverse chronological order to begin with the most recent, and then you would move down, and the most important research should have the most amount of space. So prioritize that as well. As you can see in the CT1 scoring ladder, uh, what you want is a top prize winning oral presentation at an international or a national meeting, or a first author PubMed application, which is a non case report application. Um, and in these CV sections, you should include the full citations of the authors, the titles, journals that you have actually submitted it in. Your author position should be clearly stated. And if it is still in progress, you should still include that. And you should say, this is the stage that we are in at the moment. Also, if you have any sort of research roles as well, you should include them here, especially in steering committees or in HR or any sort of Prospero registration sort of roles that you have undertaken. You should really include them here. Thank you so much for listening to me. Zaynab will be taking over now.
Hi, my name's Zaynab. I'm a medical student at the University of Sheffield, and I'm currently undertaking a placement at the Delta Centre. I will be going through the second half of this presentation. Now, moving on to the teaching experience portion of your CV. For teaching experience, this can be anything from informal teaching, such as bedside teaching, to more formal teaching, such as structured workshops and designated teaching sessions. Some more examples to include is structured bedside teaching, clinical skills in early years, OSCE preparation and examination sessions, and communication skills workshops. For your CV in this section, to score the highest points, I will go through the core surgical training scoring ladder. So to have the highest points, you need to have designed and delivered over 4 face-to-face sessions. And to score any points at all, you must have at least delivered sessions of regular teaching or undertaken some kind of educational activity. Now, this can slightly vary between specialties. So, for some specialties, they may require some kind of commitment of teaching. So, it may be, for example, 3 months or more of teaching. And this can, like I said, can vary. Ideally, you want to show a commitment to teaching. That's the main thing to get across in this CV section. Now, what to include in this section is your role in the teaching, the audience who you were teaching to, the topics you covered, the frequency and duration of this teaching, and finally, you need to have some kind of proof that this teaching took place. So that can be a letter from the consultant confirming involvement and some kind of evidence of feedback that can be done via normal feedback forms and some kind of monitored feedback. You may also include certificates of attendance if you're including an educational event on learning how to teach. Moving on to the quality improvement and audit section. Now, as you can see from the scoring in core surgical training, the key things to boost your application is to be a lead in a project. So if you can lead an audit or QI, that would score you the highest points. Ideally, you would do the audit and QI in the specialty chosen, so in this case, it would be a surgical audit. And you want that audit or QI to have demonstrated change in some way. Ideally, you will have done 2 cycles of an audit or QI or a closed loop. Now, you will still get points for being involved in an audit QI or being a contributor in some way. Now, what to include in the CV section is to share core details about the project. Ensure to highlight the QI and audit which would score the highest on your application and demonstrate involvement in the whole process. Now, additional points that you can get in this section is for presentations. So if you presented both cycles of data or at least one cycle, you may be able to get extra points on presenting your QI or audit. So make sure to also include a copy of your presentation if you want to get points for this section. Moving on to leadership and management. Leadership and management is not necessarily scored in your applications, but it may be something that is brought up in interviews and something that will help support your overall application and your character in your application. So some examples of things you might want to include are committee roles within societies in medical school and outside of medical school. If you are a representative as a trainee, as a foundation doctor, any leadership courses that you've undertaken, and managing audit or QI projects as the lead organizer. Some examples of management are if you've organised any teaching programs, if you've organised any events such as courses and conferences, and some workplace management, so anything like rota coordination, any workplace planning, or initiatives that you've undertaken in the workplace. It's important to note that leadership and management are often linked, so a lot of these go hand in hand with needing to have leadership skills and management skills. But overall, what to include in this section is for leadership, your role, the organisation that you were leadership for, and the dates for this. And for management, you want to include your situation, the action and result. So for example, if you've identified an issue, you've led some kind of development that's caused change, and the result in that will hopefully be a positive change. Moving on to skills and interests. Again, this is not specifically scored, but it does support your application. It supports your commitment to speciality. So things that you may include are some sort of transferable skills. So this can include speaking additional languages and having certain IT skills. You may also include examples of things that may have supported your commitment to speciality. So certain courses that may be specialty specific. In this case, for example, a surgical skills course. Any awards or prizes, which again can be in your chosen specialty, conferences attended, and more. You may also include some relevant hobbies if you want to include that as a way to support your character as well. So moving on to the different types of skills. that there are. You can include clinical skills that would include procedures, patient management, and any specialty specific skills that you've gained. You may also have some soft skills, which generally would be demonstrated throughout all your achievements that you've already mentioned in your CV. Things like communication, teamwork, and time management. You may have already mentioned in your leadership section, in your teaching section, for example, and hopefully that's already identified. Academic skills such as data analysis, research methods. Hopefully you've already demonstrated this with your audits, QIs, your publications, and your presentations. Overall, in this section, I would tend to only focus on practical skills and demonstrating your commitment to specialty. So avoid skills or interests that are not really relevant to the application, and try to include skills that you maybe not displayed elsewhere in your application already. Finally, moving on to referees, which is your last section in this CV. You want to have ideally 2 clinical referees for surgical training. They may vary specialty in other specialties. They're not scored, but they are verified and they need to know about your recent work. So, important details to include is details of the referee, so their name, title, their institution and department, and a way to be able to contact them. And who should your referee be? So ideally your referee should be a specialist or a consultant, for example. It would be preferable if they're working within the specialty you're applying for, but obviously this is not always available. They need to have directly observed your recent clinical development. You don't want to have a supervisor from a long time ago because they won't know your current clinical competence. An example of a referee that you may want to include is a recent educational supervisor. And again, like I mentioned, they need to be able to verify your clinical competencies. So people you need to avoid are any references that are from non-clinical referees, any supervisors that are retired or distant, because again, they won't be able to verify your current skills, and trainees or peers over a specialist. Since we've just completed going through all the different sections that you should include in your CV and what to include in them, I'm going to go through an example CV. This is purely just for educational purposes. This is not a real CV. Now, as you can see from the layout, immediately you can see there's a clear front page with a name and important details and contact information. You can see we've included a header and a footer just to make the CV look a little neater and easier to navigate. We've used a clear font and a clear layout, and as you can see from the contents page, we have got all these sections of the CV clearly labelled, and the letter will correspond to the section in your CV. Now moving on to some of the sections, as you can see, the personal statement shows who this person is, a brief description of what they've done, and a brief overall view of what their CV will mention already. The education section is in chronological order, with the most previous education being at the top. Again, this is the same for postgraduate qualifications and the same for clinical experience. They've all been laid out in the same way. It's also important to note that each section has started on a new page, so it's easy to navigate and is much easier for the person reading the CV. For research and publications, the actual publication has been mentioned easily and will be easy to find. This is the same for audit and quality improvements. In the quality improvement section, they have mentioned that they are lead auditor, they mentioned the multiple cycles, and they have mentioned the outcomes of the projects. As you can see from all these sections, they are clearly laid out. They've got clear dates, they've got clear description of what they've actually done, and that's the main thing to include in all of your sections in your CV. Again, moving on to the next few sections, which I said were not scored but are important to support your application. They are not too long. For example, the intros have just got clear, short descriptions of certain interests that will support their commitment to specialty. The referees that have been chosen are surgical specialty doctors, and they have clear contact details on there as well. And that seems to be the end of the presentation. I hope this was helpful. Thank you for listening.